July 12, 2011. Billy's Beverages in Sunderland, Massachusetts. Boston Globe reporter Andrea Estes walks into a small convenience store and finds something unusual behind the counter. A woman from Michigan is standing beside the lottery terminal. Her name is Marge Selbee. The machine is working normally. The tickets are real. The numbers will be drawn randomly. Nothing has been hacked. Nothing has been stolen. And yet this ordinary terminal is connected to a betting operation that has already moved millions of dollars through state lotteries. Marge and her husband Jerry are not predicting winning numbers. They do not know anyone inside the drawing room. They have not found a defective machine. They have found something much simpler. A rule. A rule printed by the lottery itself. A rule that changes what happens to the money when nobody wins the jackpot. For most players, the lottery is a game of chance. For Jerry Selbee, one particular version had become a math problem. And for years, the system had continued selling him tickets. So how did a retired couple from a small Michigan town turn an ordinary lottery rule into a multi-million-dollar business? And why did the lottery let them keep doing it? The story begins 8 years earlier. Evart, Michigan. A small town in the center of the state. Jerry and Marge Selbee had spent years running the corner store on Main Street. They raised 6 children. Marge kept the books and handled much of the day-to-day work. Jerry managed inventory and constantly looked for small efficiencies inside the business. He liked systems. He liked numbers. And he had a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Western Michigan University. The store also sold lottery tickets. So Jerry already understood something most casual players rarely thought about. A lottery was not just a drawing. It was a business system. Tickets came in. A portion became prize money. A portion went somewhere else. Rules determined when money moved and who could receive it. Jerry and Marge retired from the store in 2000. Then, one morning in 2003, Jerry stopped by his old business. He noticed a brochure for a Michigan lottery game called Winfall. He started reading. The game looked normal at first. Players bought tickets. 6 numbers were drawn. Matching all 6 produced the jackpot. But Winfall had one unusual feature. The jackpot did not grow forever. If it reached $5 million and nobody matched all 6 numbers, the accumulated money did something different. It rolled down. Instead of remaining concentrated in the jackpot, the money was redistributed into lower prize levels. That changed the game. Not the numbers, not the randomness, the payouts. A normal lottery is designed so that the average ticket returns less money than it costs. That difference is what allows the system to fund prizes, expenses, commissions, and public revenue. But during a Winfall rolldown, additional jackpot money moved into prizes that were much easier to hit. The probability of each number combination remained random. The economic value attached to some outcomes did not. Jerry understood the distinction almost immediately. Years later, he told 60 Minutes that it took him about 3 minutes to recognize the feature. That does not mean every ticket became a winner. Far from it. Most tickets still lost. The important change happened across a very large group of tickets. When enough lower-tier prize money entered the pool, the expected return could rise above the amount being wagered. Chance still controlled individual tickets. Scale changed what happened to the group. This was the weak point. Or depending on how you define it, the feature. Jerry was not breaking the drawing. He was waiting for the drawing's own rules to change the economics. Then he tested the idea. According to Jerry's later account, his first serious Winfall attempt involved $3,600 in tickets. The return was $6,300. That was encouraging. So he increased the amount. He later put $8,000 into another rolldown and nearly doubled it. 2 profitable results did not eliminate risk. A jackpot winner could still appear. Prize distributions could vary. Randomness still existed. But Jerry now had evidence that the structure behaved roughly as he expected. He told Marge. She was not particularly shocked. This was Jerry. He had spent years looking at systems and trying to understand where the numbers changed. But recognizing the edge was only the first problem. To make it meaningful, they needed scale. Scale required money. It required time. And it required an almost absurd amount of paper. Jerry began bringing other people into the operation. Family members joined first, then friends and acquaintances. In June 2003, he created GS Investment Strategies LLC. The name sounded more like a small investment firm than a lottery club. That was essentially how Jerry treated it. Members bought shares. Jerry tracked the money. He recorded the wagers. He recorded the winnings. He recorded the losses, and he kept the records. The group eventually grew to roughly 24 members. The strange part was what the company actually produced. Nothing. No product. No service. No factory. No employees building inventory. Its business was buying lottery tickets during selected windfall drawings. That sounds simple until the physical system enters the story. A lottery ticket is small. Hundreds of thousands of them are not. Terminals could only produce tickets so quickly. Paper jammed. Ink ran out. Stacks had to be organized. Every ticket had to survive until the drawing. Then winning tickets had to be identified inside enormous piles of losing ones. Jerry and Marge became extremely efficient at the work. They bundled tickets. They checked them. They checked them again. Losing tickets were not immediately discarded. They became records. Over time, plastic tubs filled with old tickets accumulated in a barn. The paper trail mattered. If tax authorities ever wanted evidence of the losses claimed against the winnings, Jerry wanted the physical tickets available. The system had started with probability. Now it was logistics. And logistics created its own risk. In one early family play, the Selbees and their children put in $18,000. Another player hit the jackpot. There was no roll down. The group lost most of its wager. This was the part that mattered. Jerry had not discovered a machine that printed money. He had discovered a condition. If that condition failed, the advantage disappeared. The family tried again. Within the next several plays, the earlier loss had been recovered. By the spring of 2005, GS Investment Strategies had participated in 12 Michigan rolldowns. The bets became larger. So did the profits. Then the system disappeared. In May 2005, Michigan ended Winfall. The stated reason was declining ticket sales. The lottery replaced it with another game. For most players, that would have been the end. Jerry had found a favorable rule. The state removed the game containing it. Done. Except a member of Jerry's group noticed something. Massachusetts had another lottery, and one of its games looked strangely familiar. It was called Cash Winfall. The details were different. The ticket cost $2. The number field was different. The jackpot threshold was lower. But the important mechanism remained. When the jackpot reached roughly $2 million without a jackpot winner, the money rolled down into lower prize levels. Jerry ran the numbers again. The opportunity appeared to survive, but there was a new problem. Massachusetts was more than 700 miles away from Evart. Lottery tickets had to be purchased there. The mathematical edge was now separated from Jerry by several states, thousands of tickets and hours of driving. This is where many theoretical advantages die. A spreadsheet does not have to travel. A person does. In August 2005, Jerry drove east. He was eventually connected with Paul Mardis, owner of Billy's Beverages in Sunderland. Jerry explained that he wanted to purchase an extraordinary number of cash windfall tickets. The store had a terminal. That terminal could convert capital into paper. Jerry later returned with Marge. They also arranged access to another terminal at Jerry's place in nearby South Deerfield. Now the operation had infrastructure. During their first Massachusetts play, reporting based on their records puts the wager at about $120,000. The return was approximately $178,000. The edge had crossed state lines. Soon the Selbees developed a routine. A roll-down approached. They drove east. Jerry worked from one location. Marge worked from another. Terminals printed tickets for hours. The tickets were bundled. Then came the drawing. Afterward, Jerry and Marge moved to a Red Roof Inn in South Deerfield. The hotel room became a temporary counting center. Tickets covered beds. Tickets covered tables. Tickets covered the room. They searched for winners by hand. The work could continue for days. Then they redeemed the winning tickets and drove back to Michigan carrying the losing ones with them. This was not the popular image of lottery wealth. There was no champagne. There was no roulette table. There was no moment when a machine flashed jackpot and changed their lives. It looked more like repetitive industrial work. Drive, print, bundle, sort, count, record, repeat. The amounts grew dramatically. Jerry later told 60 Minutes that a typical Massachusetts roll-down could involve more than $600,000 from the group. Reporting on their records shows that one wager eventually reached roughly $720,000 for a single drawing. That meant hundreds of thousands of individual tickets. And that scale changed the psychological problem. A small bettor sees a losing ticket. Jerry saw a sample. 1 ticket could lose. 10 could lose. 100 could behave strangely. But his entire strategy depended on what happened when the sample became enormous. He was not trying to identify the winning ticket. He was trying to own enough random outcomes for the payout structure to reveal itself. That distinction made GS investment strategies different from most lottery players. But the Selbees were not alone. Massachusetts Cash Winfall attracted other sophisticated groups. One emerged from MIT. Another involved technically skilled players who had independently studied the game. They had noticed the same structural feature. During roll-downs, the lottery could become unusually favorable for large volume betting. And now several groups were trying to harvest the same pool. Competition mattered. The more tickets large groups purchased, the more winning tickets they collectively held. But the prize pool was not infinite. More syndicates meant more people dividing the advantageous payouts. Margins could shrink. A quiet loophole had become a crowded market. And then one group changed the game again. In August 2010, the cash windfall jackpot sat below the roll-down threshold. The lottery had not announced an upcoming roll-down. According to later reporting and the Inspector General's investigation, an MIT-linked group purchased enough tickets to push sales past the threshold. The jackpot then rolled down. This mattered because the wider public had not been expecting that condition. Other high-volume groups, including the Selbees, were not positioned the same way. Lottery employees noticed the unusual sales activity. The system had always expected people to buy tickets. It had not fully anticipated groups capable of changing the timing of the system itself. Officials added monitoring intended to warn them about sudden sales spikes. But this was no longer just a mathematics story. It was becoming an administration story. There was another problem. The physical rules surrounding ticket sales were not always being followed. Massachusetts lottery regulations restricted who could operate terminals. Retail locations also had operating requirements. Yet some high-volume players were allowed to operate terminals themselves. Some stores accommodated purchases outside normal hours. Some retailers became financially connected to betting groups, and lottery officials had granted unusually large waivers from sales limits at certain locations. These details would become important later, because there were now two separate questions. Was the roll-down strategy itself illegal? And were all the procedures used to execute it compliant with lottery rules? Those are not the same question. The first answer would eventually surprise many people. The second was more complicated. By 2011, cash windfall had been operating for years. Large groups were buying enormous quantities of tickets. Lottery officials knew high-volume betting existed. The groups increased sales. Retailers earned commissions. The state earned revenue. Everyone had an incentive to keep the machine running. Then, Andrea Estes received a tip. The Boston Globe reporter began looking at records connected to repeat lottery winners. One name led back to Michigan. GS Investment Strategies, LLC. The trail led to Sunderland, July 12, 2011. Estes walked into Billy's Beverages. Marge was there near the lottery terminal. The scene looked strange enough to keep digging. Estes went to Jerry's place in South Deerfield. Jerry was there too. Public records revealed more high-volume groups. The story was no longer about one retired couple. It was about an ecosystem that had developed around a state lottery game. On July 31st, the Globe published its investigation. Suddenly, cash windfall had a public relations problem. The lottery depended on a simple perception. Everyone buys a chance. Everyone gets random numbers. Everyone plays the same game. But now the public saw sophisticated groups placing six-figure wagers and collecting a large share of the valuable roll-down prizes. Mathematically, a casual player's individual ticket had not been secretly rewritten. Psychologically, the game looked very different. Lottery officials moved quickly. Stores that had violated rules faced suspensions. Sales limits were enforced more aggressively. High-volume play became harder, and state officials began publicly answering questions they should probably have settled years earlier. Was cash windfall broken? The Massachusetts government's eventual answer was remarkable. No. In its response to the Inspector General's findings, the state said the game's design was not flawed. It had worked as intended. The roll-down was a deliberate feature. Playing during those drawings was supposed to be more lucrative than playing during ordinary ones. That statement changes the entire story. Jerry Selbee had not discovered that the lottery computer was malfunctioning. He had discovered what the rules meant at scale. The investigation also found no evidence of illicit activity or collusion among bettors, lottery officials, and agents concerning the cash windfall wagering itself. Investigators did not conclude that high-volume bettors had secretly altered the odds printed into other people's tickets. But the report was not a blanket endorsement of everything that happened. The administration of the game had problems. Retailers and players had bent or broken operating rules. Some syndicate members had been allowed to use terminals. Hours had been extended. Sales limits had received unusually large waivers. And lottery officials had been aware of high-volume betting long before newspaper coverage forced the issue into public view. The state later acknowledged that stronger enforcement should have happened earlier. That is the contradiction at the center of cash windfall. The game was functioning. The rules around the game were not being enforced consistently, and the people exploiting the mathematics were simultaneously generating revenue for the institution, now being asked to control them. The numbers make that contradiction even stranger. Across the life of cash windfall, the Massachusetts lottery generated close to $120 million for the state, according to the later investigation and officials interviewed by 60 Minutes. High-volume betting did not simply drain the institution. It also produced ticket sales. A lot of them. Reporting on the Inspector General's findings estimated that large betting groups spent roughly $40 million and received around $48 million in prizes. The groups profited. The lottery profited. Retailers earned commissions. And the argument about who had actually lost became surprisingly difficult. Critics saw a public lottery being dominated by people with enough capital to exploit favorable drawings. The state's investigation found that during normally announced roll-downs, other players still received the same odds and were eligible for the same payouts. Those two statements can exist at the same time. Equal odds do not create equal capacity. A person buying 5 tickets cannot behave like a corporation buying hundreds of thousands. But that does not automatically make the larger purchase fraudulent. It makes the system uncomfortable, especially when the system invited unlimited hope but had not fully considered industrial-scale participation. The Selbees kept playing while cash windfall still existed. Their final Massachusetts play came in January 2012. By then, their lottery operation had lasted roughly 9 years across Michigan and Massachusetts. CBS later reported that GS Investment Strategies grossed more than $26 million from lottery play. Its profit before taxes was nearly $8 million. A more detailed reconstruction by journalist Jason Fagone put the pre-tax profit at about $7.75 million. The difference is mostly one of rounding. The important number is the profit. The Selbees did not personally pocket the entire gross amount. Money had been wagered repeatedly. Returns went to the investment group. Taxes still existed. Risk still existed. And the operation had occasionally lost money. But the final result was undeniable. A retired couple had built a company whose only meaningful business was purchasing lottery tickets, and it had made millions. Cash Windfall itself ended in January 2012. The scandal was part of the pressure surrounding the game. But it would be misleading to say officials simply discovered the Selbees and immediately killed it. Massachusetts had already been reviewing its lottery portfolio and developing a replacement as Cash Windfall underperformed. The public controversy accelerated scrutiny of how the old game had been managed. Then came the formal investigation. The Massachusetts Inspector General examined documents. Investigators interviewed participants and officials. They looked for corruption. They looked for collusion. They looked for some hidden mechanism that could explain why these groups had been winning so much money. The dramatic answer was that there was no secret machine. The secret was visible. It was inside the payout design. Roll down. A word in the rules. That was enough. Jerry and Marge returned to Everett. Their lifestyle remained relatively modest. Some of the money helped family members with education and other practical expenses. The stacks of tickets stopped arriving. The long Massachusetts drives stopped. The Red Roof Inn stopped functioning as a counting room. And a story that had looked like a lottery scandal became something harder to categorize. It was not a conventional heist. Nothing was physically taken. It was not an inside job. The core mathematical advantage was public. It was not a prediction scheme. The numbers remained random. And according to the official investigation, the central betting strategy was not evidence of illicit collusion. But it was not a perfectly clean story either. Rules around terminal operation and retailer behavior had been violated or inconsistently enforced. The lottery had known that sophisticated groups were buying at enormous scale. It benefited from those purchases. Then public scrutiny arrived. Only then did the same behavior become an institutional problem demanding immediate control. That leaves one uncomfortable question. What exactly did Jerry Selbee beat? Not probability. Individual tickets could still lose. Not the drawing. The balls remained random. Not even the lottery's revenue model. The state made money while he played. What Jerry beat was the assumption behind the system. The assumption that players would behave like players. That they would buy a few tickets, hope for 6 numbers, lose, then return next week. Jerry behaved differently. He treated the lottery like a structure. He ignored the dream being sold on the front of the ticket, and he read the rule behind it. That is why the most important object in this story is not a calculator. It is not a computer. It is not a suitcase of cash. It is a lottery ticket, a small rectangle of paper produced by a machine that was functioning exactly as expected. The numbers printed on it were random. The ticket did not know Jerry was holding hundreds of thousands of others. The drawing did not know either. Only the payout rule connected them. And when enough tickets entered the same favorable condition, the economic meaning of that ordinary piece of paper changed. Massachusetts later defended the design of Cash Windfall. It also apologized for failures in how the surrounding rules had been administered. The Selbees kept their profits. The game disappeared. But the contradiction never really did. A system can be fair at the level of one ticket and still create an advantage that almost nobody is equipped to use. It can follow its written rules and still produce an outcome that looks wrong. And sometimes the person accused of beating the system has done something more unsettling. He has simply understood it. The ticket was valid. The drawing was random. The payout was authorized. The rule worked.